Hello and welcome to our financial market review. The inflation theme has gained momentum quite significantly during the recent weeks. More so this week as January figures will be released in the US and Eurozone. The 40 basis points rise for the US 10-year yield since the beginning of the year has lowered the risk premium on equity markets. This implies an implicit 10% growth in earnings per share this year to offset the risk premium without pushing the S&P 500 lower. For the time being, the consensus expects earning growth to exceed 10% in 2021, which will be further supported by the resumption of share buybacks. However, two important elements will influence this sentiment this week. The first is Powell's hearing in Congress. Given the acceleration of the 10-year rate towards 1.4%, it would be appropriate for the Fed to highlight possible control tools for the long side of the curve or for inflation forecast to be contained. Otherwise, the equity markets could correct and the 10-year rate could continue to rise. Next, the second element is the publication of the inflation figures on Friday in the USA, which is expected at 1.4%, but any overrun above 1.5% could keep the pressure on the yield curve. The question is whether this is a temporary movement or whether inflation will end the period of having no alternatives to equities. It is probably the speed at which the curve is steepening that is more worrying than its consequence on the equity markets. Moreover, the figure for economic activity and the vaccination campaign continue to fuel optimism across the Atlantic. In Europe too, the inflation situation is worrying, but with higher risk premiums and the 10-year rate still skewed on the negative side, the impact is less significant for the moment. This week will be eventful in terms of the release of important macroeconomic data, whether in terms of growth, with the leading indicator of the economic cycle and the revision of the GDP in the USA, India and Germany, or the publication of inflation figures in the Eurozone and the United States. Stay tuned for our analysis of these macroeconomic data in our next roundup, and until then, have a nice week ahead.